We're going to turn our attention now to matters hurling, of course the small matter of the All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship semi-final between Galway and Limerick this coming Saturday at Croke Park. Kilkenny and Clare then on Sunday afternoon. Delighted to welcome to the show this morning the former Limerick hurler Barry Hennessy and the former Galway hurler Tony Og Regan. Barry and Tony, morning, how are things?
Morning everyone, how are we getting on?
Keeping well, lads, keeping well. Thanks for joining us. Tony, we might start with yourself. This is a small task, playing Limerick in an All-Ireland semi-final. It should be a bit of a cracker. It's been a funny season for Galway. 10 points down to Dublin at half time, losing to Kilkenny by a goal then as well, but it's been patchy, a lot of wides in some of those games. But how do you feel about the season so far? I guess it's coming together now in last four. Anything can happen.
Yeah, I think those inconsistencies in game have probably really confused, I suppose, players, management and supporters. And I think the last day, in fairness, against Tip, there was probably a more consistent performance through the 70-75 minutes. So I think Galway supporters will be hoping that we can, bring that intensity and bring that level of application for a full 70 minutes, and then you're really putting Limerick under pressure this weekend.
Barry, from your perspective, from the Limerick perspective, I guess in recent seasons it's been sheer dominance. This year Limerick haven't beaten a team in the championship by more than 2 points. Is it fair to say that the rest of the chasing pack have caught up to or are catching up to Limerick at this point?
Yeah, Shane, I think that the chasing pack, as we call them, I don't think they got the credit they deserve this year, to be honest. They've obviously raised their own standards internally across the teams, and I think a lot was spoken about how Limerick has maybe fallen back a little bit instead of how the chasing pack has caught up with them. And to be fair, if you look at all the games this year, like the level of intensity that other teams brought, I think it's the first time in a long time I've seen Limerick players being chased, with manic aggression and being hit every chance that a team got to hit them, and stop the build-up play. So I think great credit goes to those teams. They've obviously raised their standards, and it's made a great championship so far. So.
Tony, come back to yourself. We'll get Barry's line back up in a second. Just a little bit difficult to hear him there. From Galway perspective, do you expect changes to the team much? Dahi Burke staying at 6, or will he be moved around, do you think?
No, I think it'd be really important that Galway kind of can stay consistent with their defensive system now that, I think the team are comfortable with Garage at 3 and Dahi at 6, and, I think the more they can keep those players in those central positions, the more kind of structure and organisation we have as a team, and it just brings that kind of confidence and solidity around the back line. So, when I see Galway, maybe Dahi's gone to wing back and Garage is out on the sideline, I get kind of worried, because I kind of tend to think that we're very open down the middle, as you were seeing in the Leinster final. So the more time the boys spend in those central positions, I think the more solidness we'll see in our defensive structure, and I think that'll be vital in terms of Saturday evening if they're to hold this Limerick attack at bay.
It's been a question that we've asked practically every person, whether they're a pundit or a player or a manager on the show. But for you, what is the key things that Galway can do to actually beat Limerick in this game?
Yeah, I think if you look at last year's semi-final, I think Galway started extremely well and just probably didn't execute 5 or 6 scoring chances in that first quarter that could have put a gap of 5 or 6 points on Limerick. And then coming down the stretch, I think Galway brought their subs on off the bench, and I think the thinking at the time was maybe some of these subs hadn't got enough game time during the season, and that match sharpness, like take for example Evan Island come on, had 2 or 3 shots at goal. Like normally Evan is 9 out of 10 times he'd hit the target and score, but when he came on last year, probably hadn't enough match time last year and wasn't as accurate when he came on. So you can absolutely see throughout the league and the Leinster Championship this year that they really spread that load in terms of game time and changing up the team and bringing on subs early. And I think if Galway can get to that last quarter within a score, Limerick, they know they have a bench that can impact like they did against Tip the last day. Now there's a couple of things that have changed this week in terms of Jason Flynn getting a hamstring injury. Like Jason has had a huge impact against Dublin and Kilkenny when he's come in against Tip again the last day. So that's one out of the equation for Galway, that you can spring that last quarter. Do we start Tom Monaghan? I suppose is another question now for management to bring forth, that Tom has been exceptional for Galway the last 2 seasons and probably creating 4 or 5 scores from midfield or half forward, as well as hitting his own 3 or 4 points per game as well. So that's another dilemma for management. Do they start Tom, or do they wait for his energy to come into it in the second half, when maybe Limerick's half backline midfield area might have more space in it. So they're kind of little dilemmas management will have to come up with in terms of who are the 2 or 3 impact players that will, add scores and add creation in that middle third and that final third for Galway in that last quarter. And I think that it will be the difference, because when you look at Limerick's bench last year, David Reedy come on, Peter Casey, this year will Keane Lynch be starting? So they probably have a few more cards in terms of fit players at the moment and experienced players to bring into that last quarter that could tip the scales again this season.
Barry, Declan Hannon's absence, how significant is that for Limerick?
I suppose in the grand scheme of things, Shane, it's massive. Declan's hurling IQ and his awareness is massive, and just his ability to read a game and provide that cover that's needed for the guy beside him or the line behind him. So he really is that on-field leader in general. But look, I suppose throughout the last couple of years there's always been a significant injury in the camp, and the mantra has always been next man up. So it'll be interesting to see how the squad respond to that at the weekend, and see who takes the opportunity with both hands and runs with it.
And who is that next man up? Do you expect Kyle Hayes to move to 6? Someone like Colin Coughlin, I guess, can move to 7. Michael Dignan, interestingly, this week, and I was speaking to Tommy Welch about this yesterday in studio, Dignan suggesting that maybe Keane Lynch could be a rabbit out of the hat and move to number 6. Who would you expect to be the person to take up that role?
I'd like to think it was Nicky Quaid, Shane, and that John was calling me back in there in the morning to come back into the squad, but because we were waiting long enough for it. But no, I think personally I'd love to see Barry Nash there because of the skill set he brings, and he's an out and out ball player. But I could see Dan Morrissey just slotting in there. I think Paul Murphy described him yesterday as Mr. Dependable, and he is that guy. It's rare that Dan is in the limelight for making a mistake. He does the basics, the bread and butter well, and it's probably an easier switch for John and the management team just to push one lad out and bring in maybe the likes of Richie English into the corner rather than moving 2 or 3 lads around the place. So,
are there any concerns? Didn't they move Dan Morrissey from 3 to 6 against Cork, was it? And they kind of almost immediately moved him back. It didn't seem to work. Is there any concerns there? I guess, as you say, though, generally speaking, Dan Morrissey is Mr. Dependable.
Yeah, I suppose they've had 4 weeks as well, Shane, to try this in training too. So I suppose Dan hadn't played at 6 in a while. So the last 4 weeks, you think would have stood to do whatever they're going to try there. There's going to be a lot of in-house games there and scenarios put at whoever that person's going to be. And I think that they'll be prepared for that, and they'll know that the lads in front of them have to provide that cover as well to allow Dan to provide the cover behind them as well. So I'm sure they've worked on to at this stage.
Tony, Conor Whelan, I guess, has been the talk of one of the players that's been the talk of the championship thus far. 2-10 in his last 2 games. Is there a responsibility now that the rest of the Galway forwards to kind of step up and almost help him in some regards, not just in terms of scoring but in performance generally? Like Brian Concannon held scoreless against Tip, taken off on 54 minutes. So with a little bit of help, these Conor Whelan performances could really be emphasised, I guess.
Yeah, I think we're going to need probably a 7 or 8 out of 10 performance from most of the forward line this weekend in terms of contribution, work rate wise, but also scoring wise, and a bigger spread of scores, I suppose, back from the half back line up to midfield would be a great help around that. Conor has definitely brought his game to a new level this season in terms of consistency game to game, and he needs to bring a really big one again on Saturday evening. But I would be happy with overall in terms of the work rate of the forward line and how they're playing for each other and laying the ball off. And sometimes Connor's on the end of those scores, sometimes Tom Monaghan, sometimes Brian Concannon, sometimes Evan Nyland, and you'd be hoping a couple other names pop up in terms of those 9 out of 10 performances this weekend, because you're probably going to need that to overcome a Limerick challenge that's just unbelievable at the moment.
Tony, I know you're working as a sports psychologist. We've spoken to you before about that on the show as well, but am I right in saying you were a sports psychologist within the Limerick squad back in 2019?
Yeah, that'd be true, Shane. A very enjoyable season, and unfortunately we were pipped in the semi-final by Kilkenny, so didn't get a chance to experience an All-Ireland with them.
But the mentality of the Limerick team, and you'll have seen it up close and personal, it's something else, isn't it? Like they just seem, clearly they're physically in their prime and in a very good place, but mentally as well, they seem able to deal with setbacks, and let's be honest, they haven't had a few. But even being that front runner, it's not an easy position to be in constantly. We saw with the Dublin 6 in a row team, they showed mentality on another scale as well. But Limerick have certainly been one of those teams that have shown that as well.
Yeah, like, you just have to have huge admiration. It's grand seeing the lads playing on a Sunday and they're bringing that level of hunger and skill that they have, but to do the things that you have to do day in, day out to be at the top of your game, like, everyone is analysing them to the death in terms of how they play, but for players themselves to stay self-motivated in terms of lifestyle, in terms of gym programs, in terms of mobility, in terms of their skill sessions, and their whole mindset and approach towards, every training session, every league campaign, every championship match, they've just shown a ferocious ambition and a ferocious hunger and a ferocious dedication. And till a team kind of matches that, you're not going to be in the same ballpark as them. And no one has matched that the last 5 or 6 years really. And you'd have to admire them in terms of their dedication to it and how much they put into it, because to be in that top 5% for as long as they have, it takes unbelievable dedication, unbelievable mindset, and in fairness to them, they've shown that consistently.
Barry, there's so much made about distribution, goalkeeper distribution, certainly in Gaelic football this year especially, and kick out retention being such a massive part of it. From Limerick's perspective, and you'll have seen this again up close and personal, but how important is that distribution and winning that battle to retain the ball? Nicky Quaid is obviously someone who's fairly adept at it, but I'm sure it's something that is widely spoken about in training these days.
Yeah, I suppose you've got a guy there, Shane, that's going to have the ball in his hand maybe 40, 50 times in a game, and the days of just hitting it long, I suppose, and hoping for the best, they're gone, so at the weekend it's going to be interesting to see how, I suppose, Galway responded. Do they push up, do they sit back, allow the first phase ball out, and then allow the second phase after that, where the runner comes back through the middle for it? Because you can see where teams have got joy against Limerick this year. They've kind of allowed first phase where the ball goes out to Barry Nash, and have shut out the second phase ball and have forced it to go long, and I suppose they put Limerick under pressure that way. So you can see the last day against Clare in the Munster final that Limerick went long a lot. It was probably the first time in a while I've seen where they've hit a long puck out past the other 65 consistently, without breaking it up to going short. So it'll just be interesting to see what way that the Galway set up and respond to that. But it's going back to your original question, yeah, look, it's something that's worked on religiously, because, as I said, it's a massive platform, and it has been a massive platform for Limerick over the years, and in fairness to Nicky, he's nearly the Stephen Cluxton of the hurling game. He's revolutionised the restart. So
I was asking Tommy Welsh in studio yesterday about the break that Limerick have had versus Galway, and whether it's helped them or not, because I guess sometimes you can have too long a break, sometimes you obviously need the time to refresh the legs as well. But Tommy referenced the fact that Limerick would have been playing these A versus B quote unquote matches in training, which, when you have the squad depth and strength and depth that Limerick have, I'd imagine are fairly competitive. You'll have had some experience of those games in training, Barry. I guess people always look at the break that the team have had, but those games are fairly vicious, I'd say, behind the scenes.
Yeah, I suppose you've 37 competitive lads there, Shane, that are going toe to toe 2-3 weeks, even the week before a game, and obviously everyone wants to put their hand up and make an impression and try and give what they can to the group. And if it wasn't more than once it happened where the B team actually beat the A team on occasion, so that just shows you how competitive things were. But look, that 4-week break, I think Limerick have navigated it very well over the last few years. In 2019 there was a lot of lessons in that maybe we did a little bit too much on that break, and came in a little bit flat against Kilkenny, whereas in the last couple of years they've navigated really well. They know the routine of it now, what has worked in the past. It's given a chance for a couple of lads to just refresh after probably an attritional Munster Championship again, where every game in the Munster Championship was nearly an All-Ireland final for every team, because the scalp everyone wants at the moment is the Limerick scalp, so every team they really raised their game for their Limerick game, and it was extremely attritional and very taxing on the body. So John will be glad of the break there to give lads give them a week off at the start and then to knuckle down to 3 weeks of decent training. So
Tony, Aaron Gillan is no doubt one of the players that Henry Shefflin would have pinpointed for a little bit of special treatment and looking after on Saturday evening in Croke Park. How would you expect Galway to deal with him, because he's been such a problem for every team that Limerick have come up against? 1-4 inside the last day, I think it was. Cal Mannion, of course, playing the sweeper role. You maybe have Dahi Burke mentioned. I think Tommy mentioned him as yesterday, someone who could pick up Gillan. How do you look after him?
Yeah, there's probably 2 or 3 modes you have to kind of think on. It's probably, first of all, can you get pressure on the delivery outside and not allow Limerick to get their heads up in terms of the half backline midfield area? Obviously Cahill played as a kind of sweeper role the last day as well, so I would say he'd be probably leaning towards his position more towards Gillan, even though Gillan plays central a lot and then probably moves out to different corners, so it can be quite difficult to manage that. And obviously then the man marking role inside, who's going to pick him up on that matchup, and probably looking at Garrod, I suppose, to start with and see how it goes from there. But it'll need to be a kind of a team approach in terms of closing down the space in defence and making sure those deliveries aren't as pinpoint as usual, and hope from there then you can kind of defend it a bit better, because with some of the deliveries he got in the Munster final in 30-40 yards of space hopping in front of him, he can go left or right, he can take you on, he can win it overhead. He's a real handful and his movement is just top class, so Galway are probably going to need those different modes to try and shut down that space around him.
Before we let you go, lads, we have to get the predictions. Is it hard over head? Is it head over hard? We'll see now in a second. But last year semi-final, I'm just looking at the final score last year. Limerick 27 points, Galway 121. So 4 points in it, or 3 points in it rather, in last year's semi-final. Tony, how do you see Saturday going?
Yeah, I think with the Tipperary match 2 weeks ago, and a lot of Galway has shown really good form, I think that match sharpness just might be enough to bring them forth and put them into a winning position by maybe a score or two going down the stretch. So we'll be quite hopeful and optimistic that it could be the time that they turn over Limerick in the semi-final. Very good. And Barry, how do you see it playing out?
I think the beauty of the group being together for so long, Shane, is they've been in this situation before where they know how to win big games, and I do think it'll be a lot closer than it was last year. I do think it'll probably be a 1-score game as well, and I'm saying Limerick.
I'm so excited for it, because I think last night the show James O'Connor and the lads were echoing those sentiments, saying that they'd be expecting a score in it at the end. Just before, in a word, lads, Kilkenny-Clare, Tony, who are you going for in that one?
Yeah, I'd be surprised at the level of favouritism seems to be around Clare. Like, Kilkenny are just unbelievable at semi-final stage and have a great record. So I think Clare will have to be a lot sharper than they were against Dublin, and will have to come with that energy and work rate that they had in the Munster campaign. If they don't, Kilkenny will blow you away. So at the moment I think Kilkenny are probably favourites, and Clare really have to kind of step up and show that they've improved from last year.
Barry, in a word, Kilkenny or Clare?
It's Clare for me, Shane. We've a club man involved with them, so I'll give them the vote on this one.
Give them the nod. Good stuff, lads. Thanks so many for hopping on this morning. Great stuff.